This is the continuation of the story The Werewolf Attack that changed history. The account documented in a journal that was prized from the lifeless fingers of a dead man's corpse. Please watch part 1 before enjoying this second chilling installment. "Should have never named that ship Crimson Tide," muttered Captain Thorne in panic as I hobbled aboard the boat, fleeing for my life. "Row for your lives, lads," he roared, "and pray it can't swim." He advanced up the beach, discharging his flintlock pistol into the beast's face. Raising his saber to strike, he never got the chance. The beast crashed into him, its huge jaws clamping viciously onto his shoulder, violently shaking and throwing him to lay motionless further up the beach. Smashing into the surf, its clawed hands reached for the back of the boat. But we'd cleared the shallows and it wouldn't pursue us into deeper water. My blood ran cold. How could a creature of such nightmare exist under God's glorious daylight? It stood then, waves lapping at its legs, its massive chest heaving, muscles rippling beneath a blanket of dense gray fur, yellow eyes glinting with the sun as it locked its gaze onto me and sniffed the air like it had marked my scent. I imagined I could hear its rasped breathing through the beat of the oars against the roaring waves and panicked shouts of the men rowing us to safety. I looked away, unable to meet its monstrous stare. Then a pistol shot rang out. Captain Thorne rose unsteadily to his feet. The beast was upon him in a heartbeat, pinning him to the black sands where it began to slowly devour him. I've never witnessed so many hard-end men reduced to quivering wrecks. It was said Captain Thorne's screams could be heard over the waves long after we boarded the ship. "Rigg, what the devil is this about?" demanded Samuel Cross, the ship's second commanding officer, as I scrambled aboard. "Raise the anchor," I yelled, collapsing at his feet. "We need to get as far as possible from this island." Mayhem erupted on deck as men recounted the horror to the remaining crew, who hastily loaded muskets and handed out anything that resembled a weapon while looking back upon the grisly spectacle playing out on shore. "We can't leave without provisions and repair," he replied. "We wouldn't last another week." "Look, you fool! Look to the shore!" I shouted. I remember my vision blurring then as pain lanced from my ankle, once again assailing my consciousness. I woke in a cold sweat, fear sinking its teeth into my waking thoughts. The swaying of the hammock disorientated me. Menacing shadows reached out as the light of the swinging oil lamp danced to the eerie tune of the ship's timbers, creaking and groaning in harmony with the bobbing ocean current. Looking down, my leg was tightly bound with a wooden splint. I sighed, wondered how long my broken ankle would keep me from performing my vital duties. I took out my silver cross from beneath my shirt and thanked the Creator I still drew breath. I couldn't hear the usual bustle of the crew, and below deck was empty. Worry began to fester within me. Straining to turn, I sensed movement from behind. A dark figure stepped out from the deeper shadows. "You brought that bear upon us," slurred Duval, "and you let it kill Willem." He stank of rum and swayed independent of the ship. He'd been Willem's shipmate and was envious of the friendship we'd developed on this ill-fated voyage. Hawking, he spat at my feet while scratching his groin, the dim light illuminating the network of scars on his bald head. I sensed the fire building within him. He lunged at me, grabbing my lapels, and screamed. He'd saved my life once. I matched his stare, prizing his greasy fingers from my jacket. "He died saving mine," I retorted. He looked to my leg and laughed. "What use are you to us? A boatswain that can't climb is just another mouth we haven't got food for. There's no captain and protector here now," he said, walking away, leaving me to ponder the gravity of my situation. My father had secured my passage on this voyage with the express notion I cut my teeth at command before enlisting for the Admiralty. That prospect had died with Captain Thorne. Limping on deck, I was greeted by First Mate Cross. "You've been unconscious for 2 days," he said in his pleasantly affable manner. That beast must have given you quite the fright. Duval and some of the crew wanted to give you to the sharks, but I reasoned even an injured ship's rigger has his uses. He clapped me on the back, and I felt relief. I still had one friend aboard this ship. I looked out to an unfamiliar shoreline. "Where are we?" I asked. "We sailed to a neighboring island, about 24 leagues southwestward," said Cross. "The men are restocking our provisions as we speak, and most of the repairs are complete." He turned, placing both hands on my shoulders. "What happened to Willem on that island, Rigg?" Sir, look," came a shout from the starboard side of the deck. "There's somebody in the water." We rushed over to see a naked form flailing in the waves, waving in distress. "Throw him a rope before he becomes shark bait," cried Cross. "Who is it? I swear I'll have the man flogged if this is a jest." When I look back, my mind was still reeling from the terror that had taken place on that island. I watched numbly as the shabby-haired man was hauled aboard. He seemed half-crazed and malnourished. I didn't really pay attention to the yellow tinge of his eyes and the way he sniffed the air before collapsing and vomiting on deck. But now I know. Cross demanded his name, asking how he came to be on the island, but he didn't answer. The crew crowded around him, firing off questions. He spoke then, a harsh dialect, but unmistakably French. "Englishman in English," said Cross. "Get Duval up here." Memories began to filter through the haze when he spoke. "A journal," I said, feeling like my voice was somewhere out on the waves. He looked at me then and uttered something. "Duval, what the hell is this man saying?" said Cross. Teetering on deck, Duval shrugged his shoulders as the man spoke again. "I don't know. It was Willem who studied the old texts," he said. The image of the huge gray beast slamming into its magical prison barrier crashed back into my conscious then. Grabbing Cross's arm, I shouted, "It's him!" He looked at me in confusion. "That's the thing who killed Willem and Captain Thorn." I felt my legs buckle beneath me. Laughing, Cross said, "Take our newcomer and make him comfortable under lock and key in the brig until we can make sense of his arrival, and escort Mr. Wrightson back to his bunk. He's clearly still delusional." "Samuel," I protested. "We were in a cave. Willem read from a journal that said—" I could no longer recall. My mind had gone blank. "It was imprisoned. The bright flash released it." I scanned the assembled faces of the crew. Some sneered and laughed. Others looked worried. "You all saw the light on the slopes," I reasoned. The man stood then, the crew retreating from his vicinity while aiming muskets and pistols. "Bind his arms and legs and send a runner to the island, telling the men to return to ship immediately," said Cross. "I say we put a musket ball in his head and throw him back where we found him," said Duval, looking at me menacingly through his weather-beaten visage. The man was quickly bound, then cracked in the temple by the butt of Duval's gun. "Enough!" bellowed Cross. "There will be time for establishing facts and a fair trial once we arrive in Africa. Until then, this man will be treated with civility. Is that understood?" The crew nodded assension. "Another useless mouth to feed," muttered Duval as he escorted our visitor below deck. "A word in private," uttered Cross in my ear, leading me down the ship. "Have you lost leave of your senses, man? Are you trying to unleash carnage and mutiny aboard this vessel? Not another word of this superstitious nonsense passes your lips, or my part in your recommendation for promotion will be laying in tatters. You know full well most of the crew feel you haven't earned your berth aboard this ship, so I suggest you tell them it was a bear, nothing more, nothing less." I nodded, wondering if the trauma of the event had caused me to imagine this man was a wolf and exaggerated the whole account. So, I resolved to put the incident out of mind, focusing on recovery and contribution to the voyage. A scream erupted from below us, followed by the crack of a gunshot. Duval ran onto deck, cradling his blood-soaked hand. "The horse-on bit my finger off," he cried in pain. "You shot him?" I inquired with hope. "He tried, but I managed to deflect the shot," replied another crew member. "Hit him in the leg. He's secure now." "Damn this voyage," stormed Cross. "Inform the men to ready stations. We leave these cursed islands within the day." We'd barely sailed a day before someone noticed the musket shot injury to our prisoner's leg had miraculously healed. Second mate Cross, now captain, was forced to confront that stark reality and the mutinous crew. Bound, shackled, and beaten, the man was dragged out on deck. Clutching the sides of his chair, Cross leant forward, every crew member aiming guns at the stranger. "You are clearly more than you are revealing," said Cross, worry straining his voice. He looked at me sheepishly as if in apology. "Two options now lay before you as the matter is out of my hands. You can tell us who and what you are." He pointed to the scarred hole where the musket shot had hit. "And you will be dispatched swiftly with mercy. Or," he stood then, approaching the man, "you will be keel-hauled until dead or willing to talk." The man said something in Old French and raised his hands in a gesture of mercy. "Attach the ropes," said Cross in resignation to the baying of the crew, "and throw him overboard." The wind's cold touch passed over me like a breath of despair. A harsh moonlight bathed the deck. The prisoner's screams were drowned out as he dipped below the dark surface of the water and was dragged across the ship's bottom. I flinched as salt spray from a wave hit my face and caused the lanterns to flicker. Howls of agony broke the surface as he emerged from the drink on the other side of the ship, completing his first rotation. He was hauled above deck, blood dripping from the multitude of wounds inflicted by the barnacles. Cross turned away in revulsion. I could feel the sting from his injuries. His body trembled, spasming with pain. "It doesn't have to be like this," said Cross. "Have you anything to tell?" The prisoner looked up at the moon, his face tortured in its light. He trembled violently and seemed to smile, blood oozing from his mouth. "Again!" shouted Cross, and he plunged beneath the unforgiving water once more. This time, I could feel the slow scrape of his body along the hull, imagined his intense pain from his open wounds, mixing with the salt water and the sensation of it involuntarily invading his lungs. He didn't look the same when he resurfaced, the water not able to wash away his blood quick enough. He writhed about uncontrollably. His features appeared distorted. Somehow, his limbs stretched by the ropes binding him in the pale light. Cross vomited on deck. "Again!" he shouted. "Quickly, get this barbarity over with!" And under he plunged. The long, slow scrape continued until replaced by a dull thumping on the underside of the ship. Then what sounded like claws scraping along wood. A struggle, and the rope went slack. The frayed end pulled back on board without the prisoner. "You think a shark took him?" grinned Duval. "I bloody hope so," said Cross, wiping his mouth in distress. Then a low, guttural snarl drifted across deck with the cold passing of the wind, drawing all attention to the ship's rail and the hideous pair of yellow eyes staring through it. A large black-clawed hand slowly emerged to clasp the rail and propelled the huge form of a werewolf onto deck. Muskets and pistols blazed into life, punctuating the night sky with vivid flashes, lighting up the beast's grotesque features, pummeling its flesh as it landed, roaring in primal hatred at the crew. But it didn't slow, wouldn't stop. It leapt on Captain Cross, disemboweling him before my eyes. A cutlass plunged and lodged into its black chest. The man was clawed and knocked across the full length of the deck for his bravery. The crew fled to opposite ends of the ship, hiding, firing sporadically, without effect. I tried to run, but my splint slipped on the wet deck, my gun spinning away, just out of reach. It stalked towards me, its elongated muzzle dripping with gore, its claws rank with human flesh. It pounced. I raised my arms, accepting my fate. Then, the beast was gone. Somehow, plucked from the air before my eyes and slammed into the wooden crates on deck before it could kill me. A man in wet, blood-stained clothing stood before me. The creature howled in fury and sprang at him. It was beheaded in a single swift movement with the same cutlass that had been plunged into its chest to land at my feet, its body convulsing violently until it reverted to human form. The man picked up the head and body, casting them into the ocean. I stared at him transfixed, fear seeping from my every pore, wondering if I was next, uncertain if my existence was real anymore. I questioned my sanity as I gazed upon his long, flowing gray hair, tied back behind his head, revealing sharp, exquisite features. Like rats emerging from the hold of a sinking ship, the crew came out from hiding. "Declare yourself, and how you came to be aboard our ship," I said, grabbing my short, muzzled blunderbuss with a severe shake in my arm, pointing it at his head. "The man asked you a question," interjected Duval, pressing the tip of a musket to the newcomer's heart. The stranger did not react, nor answer immediately. I don't know if I imagined it, but I swear his ears were moving almost imperceptibly, picking out every nuance of detail from the words spoken. He just stared impassively, drinking in the hushed chatter of the crew. Then he answered, in a heavy French accent, "I believe the more pertinent question is what just attacked your crew. The secondary answer to which is, how are you going to defend yourselves from the danger that now lurks among you?" He placed a finger on the muzzle of Duval's musket and redirected it away from his chest, then walked over to the eviscerated body of Samuel laying on deck, now convulsing and frothing at the mouth, fangs and claws fighting tooth and nail to escape his human form. The crew withdrew in revulsion before the cutlass skewered his head, then decapitated him. "You need to round up all your crew," he said, "ensuring no man has been marked by the beast this night. Once the moon becomes sun and the danger has passed, you will hear my story and how myself and that thing came to be aboard your vessel. If you enjoy my videos, please consider a two-pronged tooth and claw attack on the like and subscribe buttons. Watch out for part 3. And, as always, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more Nightmare Geniusly Scary content.